Good morning, Commissioners. Chief Moore, Mr. Tiefenk, Madam Secretary, Mr. Inspector General Mark Smith, Mr. City Attorney Carlos De La Guerra, and members of the public. Today is Tuesday, August 23rd, 2022. It's 9:30 a.m. This is a special meeting of the Los Angeles Board of Police Commissioners. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Good morning, Commissioner Briggs,
Present.
Commissioner Decker,
Present.
Commissioner Bonner,
Here.
Commissioner Kalanche,
Here.
Commissioner Sobroff not present. Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. Also present, we have the Executive Director, the Chief of Police, the Inspector General, and the City Attorney. Mr. President.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. We welcome everyone attending this morning. All public comment will be heard during item 2 on the agenda. We will dedicate a total of 45 minutes to public comment. Members of the public will have 1 minute per agenda item for a maximum of 2 minutes total. At the request of the speaker will be given 1 additional minute for general public comment for a maximum of 3 minutes total. Members of the public who participate in public comment are reminded that they can speak to any item on the agenda or a matter within the jurisdiction of the Board of Police Commissioners. Public comment is your opportunity to address the board, so you are free to express your opinion on matters before the board and to generally express when you disagree with other opinions expressed. However, directing your comments to other individuals who have spoken or attacking others who have expressed their opinions shall be deemed off topic and your public comment period will be concluded. Members of the public, if you choose to participate in public comment portion of the agenda, you can participate in this meeting in one of a number of ways that are outlined on the agenda. Good morning. At this time, we're going to go to item 1 on the agenda, the report of the Chief of Police. Good morning, Chief Moore.
Good morning, Commissioner President Briggs, Commissioner Vice President Decker, Commissioner Bonner, Commissioner Kalanche, Mr. City Attorney, Mr. Inspector General, and Mr. Tiefenk. As I do each week, I'm going to start with my COVID update. This past week, we have a continued pattern or trend in a decreasing number of new COVID cases, as I've reported earlier. This last week, we had 56 additional cases. The breakdown was 33 of those were sworn personnel and 23 were civilian. It's a 12% decrease from the previous week, which that number stood at 64 new cases. Regarding the new cases involving those that are fully vaccinated, 46 of the 56 personnel were fully vaccinated. That is an 82% portion of the new COVID cases. I'm happy to report that there are no hospitalizations. That trend continues. We still now have 17 long-term COVID. That's an improvement from some earlier reports. We have 150 personnel that are currently at home quarantined and recovering from COVID, and the isolation period remains approximately 9 to 10 days. That 150 personnel is a reduction of 109 of our personnel that have now returned to work. That's a 42% reduction. So again, as I reported last week, we do see the work status does tend to lag the other trend as far as new infections and recovery. But this is promising news. In regards to significant events, I'm going to talk about 2 officer-involved shootings. But before I do that, I want to address two areas of concern. One, a very positive one. I had the opportunity last Thursday to attend the Ramona Gardens Community Safety Partnership Town Hall meeting. I want to thank Deputy Chief Mata Tangarides and Captain Giselle Espinoza for the opportunity to meet with a well-attended group in the auditorium. The question and answer period lasted well over an hour. The most common themes that we encountered were one, an acknowledgement or an acclamation of residents, longtime residents, as well as more recent, about the improvements in safety of the community and their appreciation, their recognition of their relationship with the officers, and that those outstanding relationships and the partnerships and collaboration working with HACLA, as well as the Resident Advisory Council, is showing true and real results and a sense of confidence that their community is on the up and up and is moving forward in a very positive way. Desires of the group were for more senior programming and also organized activities for teenage youth. These are matters that we've recognized during earlier surveys, and again, I'm encouraged because we had legacy that was there, as well as our grid providers. And we spoke about the programming that is available and how does the department help knit together in support of the community's desires for these activities to keep our youth busy, productive, and in leadership building positions. The other matter I wanted to talk about was recent conversations regarding street racing takeovers, including the activities on the 6th Street Viaduct. I want to report that since the 7th of August, closing out on the 20th, so it's about a 2-week period of time, our continued efforts with Hollenbeck uniform patrols, CTD, traffic officers, air support, dedicated resources there has resulted in a marked decrease in the number of activities on that bridge, on that viaduct, on the dangerous activities, the risks of life that have been earlier seen there. Officers have also issued 121 citations. I've made 2 arrests, one for a felony DUI, driving under the influence, and another for a misdemeanor, and 12 impounds of vehicles that are engaged in exhibition of speed and other reckless actions on that viaduct. On the larger context of street racing and takeovers, I noted that there's been some published accounts regarding the prevalence of this in this region. Our task force effort continues both with the CHP, the Sheriff's Department, and also we're now working with efforts with smaller agencies, because we're seeing that this trend has continued to evolve, where they're moving throughout our areas, and as we apply pressure in portions of the city, they're now moving into smaller jurisdictions and other areas and imposing very dangerous circumstances. The instances do continue. They're in the city, they're most highly concentrated in the central portion of the city. This is the Hollenbeck, Newton central area, but we have these encounters occurring across the entire city. When we look at takeovers this last week, we had 44 identified street takeovers in the city. There was 46 arrests that were made as a result of these task force operations. The vast majority of them, 40, were for exhibition of speed, as well as, again, those earlier two DUI arrests I spoke about on the 6th Street Viaduct. There were 44 impounds in total. Again, the primary justification of that is the reckless driving, the endangerment by exhibition of speed in these street and roadways with spectators present. We are taking actions regarding spectators. There's been 141 ACE, those are administrative citations of those individuals, and also demonstrating the dangerousness of these actions. There have been 12 gun arrests year to date regarding these circumstances, and we are all aware of a week ago Sunday, a death of a 14-year-old youngster that was at one of these locations and was unfortunately lost his life as the conduct of these locations have become increasingly volatile and dangerous. I want to talk about, in transitioning here, I'm going to talk about 2 categorical uses of force that happened during this past reporting period. First occurred in the Harbor area on the 20th of August. There, just after midnight, Harbor Patrol officers were in the area of West 18th Street and South Pacific Avenue. They observed a vehicle that was parked in a handicapped parking spot in front of a liquor store on the 1800 block of South Pacific Avenue, and they conducted an investigative stop. There, the officers observed 4 occupants. One of them, later identified as a Mr. Russell Douthit, D-O-U-T-H-I-T, male Hispanic, 20 years of age, along with another male and 2 females inside the vehicle. Officers direct the occupants to exit the vehicle one at a time. The driver and the female that was present were detained nearby in front of the store, and Douthit remained seated in the rear passenger of the vehicle. According to the officer's statements, upon command, he exited the vehicle, and during a pat-down search of him, a Glock handgun was located in his front waistband. The officers promptly removed the firearm from the waistband and handed it to one officer, took it from the waistband, handed it to his partner, and they requested a backup. The firearm was secured inside their police vehicle, and Mr. Douthit was ordered to his knees while awaiting a backup. Officers redeployed to the front side of their passenger side of their vehicle, awaiting additional officers. The officers issued verbal commands for Mr. Douthit to move away from the passenger side of the car. Officers account the suspect failed to comply. Instead, suddenly lunged into the passenger side of the vehicle, turned towards the officer, and officer-involved shooting occurred. Mr. Dewitt was struck in his left hand by gunfire. He subsequently dropped a cell phone and a wallet on the nearby sidewalk and was taken into custody without further incident. The 3 other occupants were detained and transported to Harbor Community Police Station. Mr. Dewitt was transported by a rescue ambulance to a nearby hospital, treated for the gunshot wound to his hand. He is stable. He is expected to fully recover. He was arrested for possession of a concealed weapon, 25-400 of the Penal Code. There were no officers that were injured. A Glock Model 17 handgun, the wallet and cell phone I earlier mentioned were recovered at the scene. Force Investigation Division is investigating this shooting. Second incident occurred in the West Valley area on the 17th of August. And on that date, at approximately 7 in the morning, West Valley patrol officers responded to a report of a man smoking narcotics and armed with a machete in the alley to the rear of the 17300 block of Sherman Way. On arrival at the scene, the officers located the individual, later identified as Mr. Christian Areola Gomez, a male spanning 24 years of age, and ordered and directed him to drop his machete. When Mr. Gomez refused, the officers broadcasted a request for backup and began following him in his vehicle as he left the alley on a bicycle. The officers continued to monitor Mr. Gomez as he rode through a residential neighborhood and were joined by other officers. Mr. Gomez ultimately returned to the alley where the officers originally contacted him. And as officers continued to follow behind him, Mr. Gomez stopped abruptly, dismounted his bike, and came towards an officer seated in his vehicle, confronting that officer while holding a machete, which resulted in an officer-involved shooting. Mr. Gomez was struck by gunfire and collapsed to the ground. He was subsequently transported by a rescue ambulance to a nearby hospital where he was pronounced deceased a short time later. The machete that Mr. Gomez was carrying was recovered at the scene. Force Investigation Division investigated this and responded and will continue their investigation. The Office of Inspector General has been involved in both these, as well as the Los Angeles District Attorney's officer-involved shooting rollout team. Year to date, we have had 25 officer-involved shootings, 6 involving no hits, 19 involving hits. Year to date last year, that number was 25 also. There was 5 non-hits last year, and there were 20 hits. In regards to fatalities, there have been 11 shootings this year, officer-involved shootings involving a fatality. That number was 10 last year. Our 4-year average is 8.5, and splitting fractions. Moving to our crime picture, this last week we saw a slight increase or slight improvement in our violent crime reduction. We're at a 5.3% increase year to date. That's 1,016 additional violent crimes. Our homicides stand at 254 versus 253 last year. Our robberies, we saw some improvement. It's an 18.4% increase. Last week at this time, that number was 19.6% increase. In regards to our property crime, essentially it is flat. It remains at a 13.2% increase year to date. That's 7,325 additional property crimes. Areas of the largest number of that is in our personal theft area that we've seen the largest increase this year versus last. Overall, we have an 11.2% total Part 1 crime increase. That number is the same from last year. In regards to when I look at the shooting violence, August has been a mixed bag. August, we've had 75 shooting victims this month to date versus 89 last year for the year to date, or for the month to date of August. So 75 versus 89, so it's an improvement of 14 fewer shooting victims. However, on the homicides, the lethality of these shootings increased. We've had 35 homicides this month versus 24 for August of last year. This makes August the second month this year where we've seen this increase year over year of the number of homicides, April being the last instance in which the number of homicides exceeded last year. So while we have essentially, and I'm viewing this as essentially about the same rate of violence that we've seen last year, with some increase in lethality and a slight decrease in the overall number of shooting victims. Persons experiencing homelessness identified year to date as victims. We have 4 additional victims of homicides that are experiencing homelessness. So that is an increase that is also troubling overall in the analysis of this. Moving next to our personnel strength, we stand at 9,284. This is as of August 13th. Our authorized sworn strength is 9,460. So we're underdeployed by about 176 officers personnel. We have an academy class starting next Monday. It has 35 recruits. So we're identified to date. We are not meeting our recruitment goals, and we're in conversations with the personnel department as well as the mayor's office. And as this commission reminds, or as this commission remembers, we made a presentation including a desire to establish a signing bonus for new recruits. And we're currently working with Chair of Public Safety, Councilwoman Monica Rodriguez, to promote that and to allow the department to establish such an incentive to improve our attraction of qualified applicants. Our other two initiatives, the housing initiative is going quite well, as is the referral for individuals, city employees, department employees, to nominate qualified applicants to join our ranks. Nearly 100 of those personnel have been identified and are going through the process now. So I'm encouraged by those two incentives, and I'm hopeful that we'll see traction on our signing bonus. We have many agencies across this region and across the country that have similar incentives, and we are seeing a reduction month over month from last year and earlier years as far as the size of the applicant pools. So we are in a challenging hiring market. And with that, I conclude my remarks. I'm happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to start with Commissioner Calanche. Do you have any questions for Chief Moore?
I do, thank you. Hi, Chief. Two follow-up questions. One is on the OIS in the West Valley.
Mhm.
I don't know if I missed this, but was there a mental health unit deployed or the mental health plan deployed as part of the response to that incident?
I'm not aware. I just received a 72-hour briefing on this yesterday, and the edge knife protocols were employed. This is any call involving the person armed with a weapon that's to have less lethal available, as well as a supervisor. I don't know that that they recognize this as a mental health incident on the initial intake. The individual was allegedly smoking narcotics, and the aspect of mental health, I don't know that was known to the officers at the time.
Okay, can you just give us more background when you find out?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then the follow-up question to the recruitment goals, how many applicants do we currently have in the queue?
Over 300 have successfully passed or completed the personal history statement, which is a major investment by the candidate in order to move forward in the multi-step process. So our efforts with the personnel department are to focus on those individuals. We have many people who visit our sites and express an interest, but to complete the multi-page personal history statement signals to us an interested candidate that has passed the initial screening and one worthy of dedicated resources. We have and will continue to work with the personnel department to establish a 90-day hiring process of these individuals. And that is something that Ms. Brown, the general manager of personnel department, is committed to improving because our current standards are not meeting that threshold.
And these 300 applicants who have shown significant interest applied and are interested without a bonus, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. So
But if I could just, that number used to be 600 or more, 700, and the personal history statement, I don't want to mislead, the screening or the attrition past the personal history statement is still substantial. We will lose on average, for instance, of the applicants who make the personal history statement, then the next steps will attrit 10, 15, 20% of those applicants. Currently, for every 100 applicants, we will successfully hire about 5. So while the 300 may suggest that that would take us for the next 6 months, I would be hopeful that we would have perhaps as 100 of those would be viable. It could be even fewer than that.
In your experience, how many, well, maybe, I don't know if you would know this, but I think in the past, because our process has taken so long, many of those that are very interested in joining the department tend to drop out because they get hired faster in other departments. So I think that's a significant issue for us, that people just lose interest because it just takes so long to get hired. So I'm wondering what the attrition rate is because of the length of the process. And I don't know that you would know that, but I just think that if we have a 90-day hiring period, I think we can retain a larger percentage of, and I'm guessing, that's just my.
No, that is our estimation as well. This is subjective, of course, but we think it's a combination of factors. This is not, unfortunately, the low-hanging fruit of this. So the easy gains. I don't think one particular aspect of our hiring program and ambitions will get us over the mark. We need to improve the. We need to attract a diverse and qualified group of applicants that are representative of all the communities of Los Angeles. That's outreach, effective outreach and marketing. But we also then need to ensure that the barriers, the thresholds, testing is fair and open and encouraging for people to proceed through it. And then efficiency. It needs to be one that is timely and quickly. Again, even 90 days, in my view, is too long. In the department, our civilian background processes are taking us 10 days to 2 weeks.
Wow.
So so this is now I recognize that there are a less strenuous process there. There's a psychological test with sworn police hiring. There's a medical test, and some of those attributes are not in the civilian hiring background process. But I do believe and committed to doing whatever is possible to support the personnel department in achieving these shortened lists. But at the same time, we have individuals that, again, we saw in today's media releases about the benefit of personnel working from home. There's a lot of things that go into people's metrics of what a profession they choose and what the job conditions are. Policing is pulling from an increasingly smaller pool of interested applicants for a variety of reasons. And so we have to be better at being upfront and being the world-class agency, but also having world-class processes that quickly identify, screen out those that are not qualified, but those that are, protect them, bring them in, mentor them, and work to ensure their success as they're qualified.
I think overall, any industry right now, it's very difficult to hire. Just from personal experience, like young people are difficult to hire right now, but well, hopefully this 3-month period will help. That is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Kalanche. Commissioner Sobroff, I see your mic is open.
Sure. Chief, how many officers are we funded for that are empty positions right now? Rough.
146, let me see, 176.
There are 176. So if we had 176 people that qualified and went through everything, we have the money to hire those officers. We just can't get them.
Yeah, actually, I'm sorry, Mr. Commissioner. Actually, we're authorized to hire 625 new personnel.
Okay.
However, we can go as high as 780 if we can identify the applicants. So
Okay.
that number
is really about. So if I wouldn't be exaggerating if I would say that we have 700 funded possibilities for police officers in the department. Is it correct? Is that exaggerated?
Well, no, it's not exaggerated. I think you have, I would rather say you have about 400 positions that because the 780 we hire, we're dealing with the attrition of people who are retiring.
Okay.
And so it's, we gain so many, but we lose so many through retirements. And so we want to hire 780. The council has funded us, recognizing the size of that goal at 625 because they have concerns about whether or not we can actually reach 780. And I have concerns also that even reaching now 625 after the first
Sure.
academy classes this fiscal year. So I'm trying to, we're doing everything at every venue possible to raise issues regarding this problem, this challenge, and solutions. And it's quicker hiring, but it's also, I believe, incentives and attracting qualified applicants to this department by the opportunities that it offers.
Okay, so in the elevator, without exaggerating, the number that I could say would be about 400,
Yes.
correct? Okay. Tell me, the same number for civilian hires?
Yeah, so civilian hires, we're down 39. Our plan
Okay.
this year is to hire 320 new civilians. We're going to lose about 280 due to retirements.
Okay, so again, in the same elevator as we're going down, I could say in addition to that, we basically have about 320 positions. Are there, when only 5 out of 100 apply, make it, do any of those qualify, or can they be shown the opportunity to switch over to be a civilian in the
Yes.
department?
Yes, we regularly go through and individuals who make it to the academy and encourage if they can't make it through, if they decide that this is not the job that they want, or if they can't meet the requirements. But earlier stages of this as well. I spoke with just a couple of weeks ago, there was a son of a police officer who's, frankly, his background would preclude him from becoming a police officer, but his background would not preclude him from becoming a civilian member of this organization. And we asked for him to consider that and to pursue that.
Okay, and so would you say that out of the so we have 5 out of 100 becoming officers, would you say that there's another 5 that would go to be or not that many?
Well, I think that's math on a napkin right now. I mean, I
Okay,
don't,
okay.
I wouldn't be in a position to give you that number.
So the big picture where I'm leading is, if the services that the civilian hires do for the department, if the civilians, if it was fully staffed, would you be able to move some people out into the field? In other words, do we have officers doing work that civilians could be doing?
Absolutely.
No.
We have, there's more than 30 officers that are working in custody services division today because of our inability to this point to hire enough custody services civilian professionals. And
Okay.
so that's just one block of personnel. We are down, our staffing in civilians deployment is 2,666.
Mhm.
That number 3 years ago was over 3,000. Yet the work of this department, both front office and back office, the inspections, the oversight, the completion of administrative tasks have not been curtailed or eliminated anywhere near that degree, which has meant that we have police officers that are working in positions that would otherwise be filled earlier by civilians. And so this is a desire of the organization to build on both sworn and our professional civilian staff, and it's critical because there's also, for instance, positions within our 911 dispatch center that police officers don't have the capabilities any more than they have the capabilities of being equipment mechanics. They don't have the job set or skills for the complexity of the position. And we have regularly today in our communications center personnel working on an overtime basis, and our call times for 911 answers and routine calls answer times have suffered because of a need for additional staffing.
Okay, so being a civilian working at LAPD is a good job. It has benefits. It's got all the it's not the same as being an officer, but it's still a good job. And what we're saying here is, if we could get more civilian, we have 320 potentials. That could free up another 20 or 30 or 40 officers to move back to their positions. Okay,
That's correct.
I think that's really interesting. My last question is, we don't have enough officers and we don't have enough civilians. Who's being hurt because of that? In other words, are there specific departments? I read something where, and I don't know where we have to do with animal, animal safety, or maybe that was a county thing, but where are the citizens of Los Angeles being hurt by lack of
Sure.
officers? Where are you cutting back? There's got to be priorities.
There it is. And there was you may be referring to a recent article with our robbery homicide division, which we had to downsize, significantly curtail our cold homicides. These are unsolved cases that are 5 years or longer, where previously we had a squad of personnel that were assigned to that. We had to downsize. Actually, we had to eliminate our sexual assault investigative team within robbery homicide division and decentralize those investigations out to 21 areas. Now,
that deserves a pause. I mean, those are serious crime, serious issues especially for women. And here we're being forced because of lack of officers to have to
prioritize those investigations. Those investigations remain a priority at the local level,
Yeah.
but our ability to handle the more sophisticated ones by dedicated teams of detectives with decades of experience, those have been hampered by a reduction of workforce of more than 600 sworn personnel. So it has to come from somewhere. Our effort is to protect our core work. For instance, in our homicide investigations, we've added staffing. When we saw our clearance rate drop below 60%, it dropped to 56% 2 years ago. We shifted resources with the increase in homicides and shooting violence. We shifted detective resources into those teams, and that rose that solve rate above 66% last year, and I believe it's about 69% year to date this year, because we know that that's the most serious crime, the taking of a life and identifying and bringing to justice those individuals. So we've tried to protect those robbery investigations. Violent crimes we maintain. Our efforts have also been helped by additional overtime funding so that our human trafficking investigations can still be maintained. And then lastly, with the violent crime and our violent crime task force and reductions, we've also increased on an overtime basis our uniform patrols and our foot beats and our engagement with communities, so that we're present, not just chasing those individuals that have been responsible for this violent crime, but also efforts to increase our patrols that would otherwise we'd not have because of reduction in staffing, so that officers are still present and working and engaging in our communities to improve the sense of safety and a perception of safety by seeing officers on the beat and in the areas.
Okay, thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, Commissioner Soboroff. Commissioner Bonner, let me go to you. Do you have any questions for Chief Moore?
Thank you. Yes, I do. 2 questions. So first, Chief, going back to the report on the Ramona Gardens CSPB event, and you indicated the community request was for more programming of activities for kids and so on. And I wasn't clear whether you were indicating that that was something the department was being asked to itself provide or support.
Well, the ask was actually for the department to be engaged in it. And what we directed the conversation back towards was identifying those agencies that are best suited for that activity and ensuring that they are known to the residents of Ramona Gardens and that they're actively engaged. That's why I referenced Legacy and the grid providers that were SEA that was also present. There are a host of programming that sometimes are just beyond the arm's reach or awareness of the residents. And while the preference may be for an officer to actually administer that program, that could, with the limited number of personnel we have, that's a very expensive resource and a very precious resource be tied to youth programming, for instance, or a seniors program. What we'd rather do is, and what I see the flywheel of success of CSP is that when LAPDs and our leadership teams work with the stakeholders and they draw them together into the shared responsibility of how to improve the safety of that community, that means also the shared responsibility of tasking other parts of our society to provide those services and to step up and know that that's a priority to these residents. So every request of LAPD, every request that we're there, it doesn't land. While it may come to us, we don't burden it. We don't. Doesn't mean that we're tasked, but what we are tasked with is understand the strategic plan, the community safety plan that is going to move that. And I look forward to Chief Tingarides' presentation to this commission in the coming months that will talk about how that actually works. And sometimes that means that organizations that should be providing aren't, and they get a little uncomfortable. And other times it means that they need more funding and they need support by perhaps a grant or a council office or other means of which to support them. But we recognize, finally, I'll close, that, for instance, also there was conversations about LA Unified School District and those resources and programming that's available there. And some of the residents, prefers to have their local program. They don't want to go to an off-site location. They don't want their children to, for fear of safety. And that's where we need to work through that to ensure safe passage and to recognize if there's an incident, is it folklore or is it, or how much of reality is it? And how do we work together so that we can improve the traction of people accessing needed services and programs, supportive programming, but for fear of gang intimidation or neighborhood conflicts that may have even dated, years ago, but are the folklore of people keeping people from going outside of their neighborhood. We need to help work through that.
Yeah, so the request is, you mentioned, I think, the main part of it, which is to ask the Bureau, when they do provide their update, to include a comment on this this question of those circumstances where the department may be providing or engaged in versus supporting, facilitating some of the programming. So that's one question. The other is also, I know in some of the weekly briefings and just other comments, we've seen some promising indication that there is some correlation between some of those types of activities on the one hand and some crime reduction on the other. And so if they can comment on what that trend is and what correlation, if any, they see in that regard, would be helpful. The other question is about robberies, the robbery situation, which I think the robberies were up about 18.4 or 18% or so, I believe. Is that accurate year to date?
Yes.
And the question there is just, I know that I don't know, there was recently the somewhat high profile robbery of the 7-Eleven where there's a number of individuals who went in.
Flash mob.
Yeah, right. And the one question, I don't know, I didn't pick up whether that was in the LAPD's jurisdiction, but that's one question. And related to that, just understanding whether, there's some months ago we were seeing a lot of activity and response to the robberies of high-end retail establishments. And the question just is, the latest, this was a 7-Eleven, is it a continuation in some way of that earlier trend, or is that earlier trend moderated and this is, more of a one-off incident? So
that 7-Eleven, that flash mob that occurred there was the aftermath or part of actually a street takeover. And unfortunately, an earlier, just hour and a half earlier than that, outside the city, was the initial part of the street takeover that resulted in the death of a 15-year-old young boy that was killed as a spectator there. That moved to this location in the city limits, and then there was this flash mob there. There was also, now I would say that was a one-off, but we had an auto track dealer in a different portion of the city that had a similar break-in. It wasn't open at the time that the sideshow or the street disturbance was occurring, but it was burglarized by the spectators there, and they lost about $6,000 worth of batteries and some other equipment, some other vehicle parts. Those two instances to date, what I'm aware of is that those are one-offs, or those have been an amplification or an escalation, if you will, the tactics and the recklessness of what happens there. And then we've reported over this last year is that we've seen this continued escalation. And then what we do know as a profession is that unchecked, that people they have a tendency to continue to try to outdo one another, and one up one another. and the conduct can accelerate and escalate in its violence and its impact on a community, which is why it's so important and why we're dedicating resources to try to disrupt and to deter these. We are working in undercover capacity. We're working with social media to understand where these are being advertised or being promoted. And we're also following up and taking action, for instance, and reviewing the video from that 7-Eleven, as well as the evidence from the auto track to identify the suspects that are responsible and to arrest them and see that they're fully prosecuted. The aspect of follow home, follow off bandits unfortunately continues, but as does the arrest. I would believe that it's been about 4 months since we last reported. It was April was our last report to this commission and a summary of what Robbery Homicide Division is doing. Come this November, it will be a 1-year period since we formulated the task force, and I would encourage and support from a matter of awareness that we update the status of those instances for robberies. Robberies as a matter, there's a striking sense of a lack of safety by members of our community, because when we look at the instances of robberies, it is this 18% increase, 941 additional robberies this year versus last. But we look back to 2019, robberies are up about 2%. So there are about 128 additional robberies. So it's not this pre-pandemic level. But what, as I've said before, the strikingness of it is that the number of robberies involving a firearm since 2019 are at 57%, 713 additional robberies involving a firearm. And that is when you look at when robberies are only up from 2019 by 128 cases, you can see the stark concentration of robberies involving a firearm. And what I'm asking for and asking the district attorney's office is that when we arrest individuals involved in murder, or particularly an attempt murder and robberies involving firearms, that we're finding that many times these are instances in which they're out on bail from earlier felonious offenses, that they're using commission of a firearm and commission of a violent crime, and that we're not getting enhancements in the instances that are available. These are levers that are there that are available to deter these individuals from further acts, and also to deter others that would be tempted to get into this work and use a firearm. So we've got more work to do in the prosecution of these individuals. But I'm proud of the work that our detectives are doing, their follow-ups, the depth of their investigations, the tying together of individuals that are responsible for a number of these series. And when they are arrested, they are being brought. And we're asking, again, for the full weight of the criminal justice system against them, because this is costing people lives. And lastly, it's having a disproportionate impact on a sense of safety here in Los Angeles.
Well, thank you. When there is the future comment on the robbery situation, the other point here I recall asking, maybe this was several meetings ago when there were some of the other street takeovers, the question was what kind of criminal activity, other than the street takeover itself, what kind of criminal activity are we seeing associated with that? And so I would appreciate at some appropriate point in time a comment on what now with the passage of time and more of these having occurred, if we could have a comment on that, it'd be appreciated.
Okay, and just briefly, that I mentioned that earlier in my remarks, there were 12 gun arrests that were seen year to date involving street racing and street takeovers. We know of the murder of the 15-year-old that occurred a week and a half ago. That's outside our jurisdiction, but shooting violence, ADWs, we see these on a regular basis, and I'll be happy to, and we have a report with a lot of this detail that I'll ask Commander Passos to meet with you that can give a more detailed, and of course, we're also welcome a presentation to the commission on this important subject as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Commissioner Decker.
Thank you, Commissioner Briggs. Chief, I do have a few questions. I'd like to go back to some of the topics discussed earlier. First, with respect to recruitment, I know you're also very in tune with what's happening on a national level, given the work you do with national, international policing organizations. My question to you is, given what we're trying to do, at least with respect to shortening recruitment time, the incentive programs, both for recruits and for recruiting, and the housing assistance, all of which is coming forward almost simultaneously. Are you aware of any other incentive efforts being done by cities, by departments to recruit that we are not yet engaged in?
There's an emerging one that Commissioner Harris, Michael Harris, is using in Baltimore, where he is working with some historic Black colleges, universities that brings in interns. And he's brought in a small group of about 5 to 7. It's a paid internship as a means of interesting these candidates and potentially a career in law enforcement, but at the same time benefiting from their outside-in viewpoint of their association with the department, and ideas for how the department could build and deepen its trust with the communities that have been most disadvantaged and at times historically, if you will, feel over policed and disrespected by his department. So that's an area that I'm interested in us exploring. We have a number of universities around this region, and I'd like to see if on our civilian side, the ability to hire some short-term interns. There are a local hiring program initiated by Mayor Garcetti that I'm asking for us to deepen that in that arena, go towards the interns to see if we can create an interest pool there to deepen our recruitment numbers. Other than that, I think that what we're constantly scanning my fellow chief executives to understand there's a lot of duplication right now. I will say that most areas, most agencies are more inclined to invest in laterals than they are the area of recruit incentives of just fresh recruits. So, which troubles me. I think that's we're robbing Peter to pay Paul. We need to build a pool and not harvest personnel from one another because that's just creating vacuums in different parts of the fabric.
Understood. But you are going to be working, your team is working on exploring the
Yes.
extra internship. Okay. Second, on recruitment, are the bonuses, incentives that we are providing, are those competitive with other departments in our region, Southern California region?
I believe they are. That's one of the questions that Councilwoman Rodriguez asked, and we think we've given a listing of what the surrounding areas are providing, and we think that they're competitive for the agency of our size. And again, the other agencies around this area are more invested in laterals than they are in brand new recruits. But to the extent that they are, we think we're competitive.
Okay. I want to follow up on some of the questions Commissioner Soboroff asked with respect to the impact on the community. And obviously, when you have fewer officers, you have to set priorities, which you explained. But you also talked about curtailing work on cold cases and eliminating specialized units such as the sexual assault crimes. Of course, we learned over this period of others. Chief, I would like to get a report from the department. Not today, I don't expect you to have the numbers, but I'd like to have a better understanding of the impact. So for example, on sexual assault crimes and victims, is there a backlog of cases? Are the cases taking longer to solve? Are they being solved? And what's the percentage, say, as compared to previously when we had those specialized units? I do understand in asking for this, that when you have 600 fewer personnel, there are priorities that have to be made. But I think we need to do a better job of explaining to the public the impact that has had, as well as the opportunities within the department if we are able to further recruit and restore some of these units. So if we could get that back in, say, within the next month or two, I'd appreciate that.
Okay, yeah, happy to. We have a full listing of this realignment, including our fugitive warrant sections and narcotic details and vice details. So happy to.
I'm sure you know like which units were cut, but I also want to be sure we get the impact on solving crimes.
Work that they otherwise would be doing.
Exactly. Okay. All right. Thank you, Commissioner Briggs.
Thank you, Commissioner Decker. And Chief Moore, it appears that all my commissioners have basically covered all the topics I was going to cover with you. However, Commissioner Decker did just touch on something there, which was picking up from Commissioner Soberoff's comment directly related to the decrease in the number of personnel, sworn personnel that we have, and its impact on the community. The report that Commissioner Decker just requested, I would like you to include in it, if you could, the current response time that has been impacted by the decrease in our personnel strength. And please compare it to, some measurable amounts, 2018, 2019, so that we can see how the decrease in the number of officers has impacted the department's response time to certain calls.
Absolutely. That's figures that we track at each individual area, bureau, and historical will go back more than 20 years. And I will tell you about the short version, our emergency response time remain under our 7-minute goal. However, our urgent and routine calls response times have lengthened significantly.
Thank you very much, Chief. At this time, I have no further questions. We can go to public comment. Thank you.
Okay, our first speaker is Nee.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all of them.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, so I just wanted to start off by naming, just because the Board of Police Commission and Chief Moore always fails to adequately spend time to talk about the number of community members they continue to kill. And so far in 2022, LAPD officers have shot over 25 people, killing 11 of them. And so the ways that LAPD continues to escalate situations, regardless of how much money continues to be spent to allegedly train to de-escalate, for mental health evaluations, for a number of different trainings, we continue to see the continued history of LAPD, which is to cause harm in communities. So it's not surprising that we continue to spend so much funds and so much more resources for things like community safety partnerships, which really just are other ways of policing low-income community members and folks in housing projects. The expansions of CSP programs have continued to both not take into consideration what folks in the community have been continuing to say, things like fixtures of lights, things like putting stop signs or bumps, or even just the parkings that ends up getting limited because of these operations. But yet we continue to see LAPD tout that these CSP programs are continuing to be more and more successful, even though people in the community have continued to say that they have asked for certain things, and years have gone by where LAPD doesn't provide the alleged things that they continue to be told in these meetings. And so it just really shows that a lot of these, that LAPD is an armed social work, and that they only do provide the lights or like these simple repairs when it helps to criminalize folks in the community. It's also really disgusting to have Chief Moore explain the fact that they are limiting, or the first thing to remove from funding, or the first thing to be removed is things like the investigations of sexual assault and rape kits, because if you look at the history, if you look at the own disciplinary hearings that LAPD continues to put at last minute, including the July 2022 disciplinary penalties, you'll see a number of different cases where LAPD, where, for example, LAPD officer Oscar Rojas, who had sexually assaulted his ex-partner, and they were working with an LAPD investigator for a long time, was never disciplined, even though they were recommended for termination. So I'm not surprised if they end up going for early retirement or through SIP.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have W. Blower.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Good morning, everyone. I hope everybody is well. Yesterday at 4:45, I submitted a public response, but it wasn't posted, and I'm curious to the reason why. I have my own beliefs, but I could be wrong. I will repost this with the updated numbers and an updated graph and resubmit this to everybody, even to you, Chief Moore, to ensure that it gets posted next week. I want to talk a little bit about leadership. You are all in a leadership position in one certain way or another. Understand this. Leadership is a gift. It starts at the top with you. As a leader, you have to have the ability to inspire others. You have to be a natural leader that leads by example. You have to be an effective communicator, which we talked about last week, and a listener. Oh, is everything okay with my mic? If you can hear me, please raise your hand high. 3 people out of 9 raised their hand. That's a problem. I've heard many listeners talk about issues. If 3 people out of 9 are listening, that's not effective listening, is it? No. You also have to have the ability to benefit from constructive criticism. If you demonstrate these traits, you won't have anything to worry about with people applying for the job. Also, for people applying for a leadership position, whether you're male or female. If you demonstrate these traits, you will have a desk load of applications. But when you don't, you are not going to have the people. I want to report on COVID. As of today, per the Chief of Police, the department is at 74.44% of the vaccinated becoming ill. That's basically from 4 people vaccinated, 3 of them are getting COVID. Your mandate is not working. Every day, your COVID mandate is becoming more and more obsolete. It's moving further down the horizon than the City of Los Angeles vision for public safety. Just following orders as your excuse is an admission of guilt. It's not going to be a defense. I want to leave you with a quote from Thomas Sowell. People will forgive you for being wrong, but they will never forgive you for being right, especially if events prove you right while proving them wrong. Thank you for taking the time to listen, most of you, to me today, and have a great day. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 3146.
Hi,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
well, I'd like to speak for 3 minutes if I could.
Okay,
Sometimes what I've seen in the LAPD commission has a no justice issue. And there's that phrase, no justice, no peace. However, in some of these protests, major crime will not produce peace or justice. So I have a hard time with that. On these Zoom calls, a while back, because I've listened to a lot of meetings, there was a caller said that y'all a bunch of racists, and there was a Zoom glitch on the word racist, and it said y'all a bunch of racists like that. I thought that was hilarious. There's a 45-minute public comment, and I think it should be at least an hour and a half. But I want to say I did find 2 meetings where the secretary says that's all the callers, and only 30 minutes went by. But I want to tell you about the reasons, at least what I think. Most people realize there's no reason to call because you might not make it in. Why call? They only got 45 minutes, so there's not enough room. It needs to be an hour and a half. Many callers also were dealing with City Hall. So another comment, this board, definitely deals with the being called white supremacy. White supremacy, LAPD is called white supremacist system, all this kind of stuff. And I don't know how this came to me, but I started realizing it doesn't matter if it's white supremacist. Because if it was black supremacist, right, the Congress was black, California legislator was black, the LAPD was all black. The chief was black. The commission was black. You know, everything that's still illegal would be illegal if it was black supremacy or Mexican supremacy or Asian supremacy. You know, murder is not legal. It doesn't matter if it's black supremacy. They put it all together, right? It's all black. You know that arson is not legal. How about the big one, resisting arrest? That's where you get the big conundrum, right? Oh, that was a white cop and he did the sons of the blah, blah, blah. Right? Where is that legal anywhere to resist arrest? How about in Africa 3,000 years ago? You know, it wasn't legal to resist arrest in Africa. How about the aerosol can was a flamethrower that burned a police officer? Do you know if that was a black police officer with a black supremacy system? That's still not something you can do to a police. Black people wouldn't put up with that. Black supremacy. You think you can go in and rob 7-Elevens or smash and grab? How about the Asian hate? Because if it was black supremacy system, Asian hate is okay then? Or what's another one? Robbery and theft is okay because it was a black supremacy system. It doesn't matter if it's Asian or white supremacy or black Mexican supremacy or Spanish supremacy. How about Catholic Church supremacy? Doesn't matter.
Okay, our next caller is T.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
It's amazing who you all let go on and who you cut off. And we know it's racist. 25 shot to year to date, 17 hits and 10 killed. So 4 people were sitting in their car. They happened to be brown folks, and y'all rolled up on them for what? You didn't even mention why or what they were doing, except they were just sitting in their car. The guy gave you his gun, from what it sounded like more. And then y'all shot him when he was trying to get his wallet and his phone. Where's the de-escalation? You shot the man trying to get his ID and his telephone after he gave you the gun. So white people can walk around with guns, but black and brown folks always get criminalized. It's the Second Amendment. We have the right to bear arms. But when black and brown folks have a gun or a weapon, they automatically get shot. If it's white people, a January 6th insurrection or white supremacists walking around with guns, they're okay. They get taken into custody. They get taken to Burger King. Nothing happens to them. Then you shoot a guy on the west side in the alley for doing drugs, but more acted like, well, he was doing drugs, so he deserved to get shot. Even Kalanchi asked, was there a mental health team sent out for observation? No, you just shot him. And you know, cops, y'all have your hands in this drug dealing and gun dealing. Who do you think gets all the drugs and the guns in the country? Y'all move that. Y'all put it in our neighborhoods intentionally, and then you criminalize us for it, right? You killed a man because he was doing drugs. What about asking him if he needed help, right? Okay, y'all don't prevent any crime. You actually cause crime because you're taking all of our money. You were never defunded. Cops aren't getting hired because there's a low morale. They don't want the job. Good, great. Shut y'all down, right? Cops, y'all have the funding. Even more said, you have enough funding for them. Y'all want to subsidize the housing, right? Put cops in our housing when they're violent domestic abusers. Their guns go off while they're cleaning them or they're drunk. 4 homeless people died, right? That money could have been for housing. 4 homeless people died. And you want to subsidize cops living next to us and they're dangerous. CPS, we don't need it. We don't want you working with our youth and our elders because you're constantly abusing them too. And every agenda item on here is asking for more money again. You get 3.8 billion. No, we refuse and reject y'all getting more money. You've never been defunded. We want to defund you. We want to abolish you. And we want this violence, which is y'all, out of our communities, right? Stop killing our folks.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Matios Kedane.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to touch on when Chief Moore addresses crimes of poverty and says, quote, unchecked, they have a tendency to outdo one another. That is the language of the repeatedly debunked broken windows policing. That's the language of someone who doesn't believe that crime occurs because people are resource deprived. Rather, he believes in an inherent criminality of certain individuals. And if we look at who is deemed criminal in the city, we know Moore is talking about Black and brown people. On the CSB donation for the mini Mounties, uh, LAPD stated intention can't be trusted. So we're going to look at the results of these things. And the usage of students to justify criminalization is something we've seen all throughout the city. Just around 4118, just now, we talked about kids not having to witness unhoused people as a means of criminalizing, ironically, unhoused students, probably. So this is just something we keep seeing happen. And it also speaks to just the fact that LAPD leverages these resources and these good things, but brings them with a badge and a gun. So we want our kids to go to the LA Zoo, to go to Knott's Berry Farm. We want kids to learn horseback riding if they're interested in that. We just don't want them to do it with police. And we can't get these programs for our youth because you've got a chokehold on this city's budget. These CSP programs, they don't keep anyone safe. So what do? Well, if we look at instances like the inevitable racial violence that LAPD does, like the shooting of Richard Risher, who was killed in Nickerson Gardens, which is now a CSP site, it gains the community's trust for that violence to continue. It allows Chief Warren, the LAPD, to corral resource-deprived community members in a room with armed LAPD officers like you did in Ramona Gardens to cherry pick input that expands the LAPD resources. And also, to the point Nee was making earlier, these kids just aren't safe with LAPD officers. The Stop LAPD Spying Coalition has a timeline of sexual and child abuse harms caused by the LAPD. And this list is about 5 years old. I'm going to read some of the items on there. In June of 2017, Officer Robert Kane is accused of statutory rape of a 15-year-old cadet stationed at 77th Division. On July 20th of that same year, Kane is charged with sexual assault. In October of 2015, Cadet Youth Services Officer Montez de Oca is investigated for sending lewd messages and photos to a 16-year-old recruit. In 2014, LAPD Detective Michael Bramless is arrested for a series of robberies. One of the robberies involves a 16-year-old girl whom Brambles robbed of her school backpack at gunpoint. Let's not forget all the instances of violence and assault on Black and brown youth by LA school police before they were removed from schools because that's what the community wanted. Yeah, this commission's a sham. We don't want any more resources for LAPD, and we certainly don't want the LAPD around our youth and in our communities. This is counterinsurgency. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Andrew Gravener.
Okay, 1 minute of general.
Okay, 1 minute.
Okay, yeah. I was as usual. I'm taking just 1 minute of public comment because 45 minutes a week is not enough. So so maybe you can listen to someone else, maybe a little bit more. So every week, the LAPD is committing violence against the community. The LAPD has shot, I think it's 25 people this year and 2 last week, with one of them, the shootings being fatal. This violence is continuing, and you keep talking about this increase in crime, but crime is not increasing. That's a lie. The violence against the police violence against the community is increasing. So I say abolish the police.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Javier.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, what items
Okay.
would you like to speak on?
Yeah, I'd like to speak on some of the discussions that have taken place with the commission about with what's occurring and manpower and recruitment and so on and so on.
Okay, 2 minutes.
Okay. I understand that there's a shortage of police officers despite the rancor and all the moaning and groaning by people who think that we live in a completely civilized society, which we know we don't. Sometimes in trying to do the right thing, agencies, not just LAPD, end up creating unexpected problems. And let me give you a perfect example. You now have a system where when you're involved in a traffic accident, instead of police cars responding, you go online or you do a telephonic report. But there isn't a mechanism to deal with rather unusual situations. The city of Los Angeles, the city council, in their infinite wisdom, has continued to give out contracts for these electric bikes and things like that because it's environmentally, the right thing to do, and plus it generates revenue for the city. However, there's a huge flaw in these kinds of things, and I personally have experienced it just the other night. These Lime bikes, these green colored bikes and other scooters that are left, that are abandoned, thrown down in the middle of the streets and cars run over them, whatever. I have a situation where a bike that's sat across the street from my home for 3 weeks, somebody finally got on it and decided to drive downhill. And in the course of doing that, they crashed into my car. And so I called, I'm told to make a telephonic report. The problem is that the bike company owner, Lime, is unresponsive. The phone number you call, they answer in China. They don't speak English, and you can't communicate with them at all. Filing a report does me no good. It's not about the insurance, okay? It's about trying to address the fact that this is a public policy issue. And the police department gets caught in the middle, and citizens get upset because what do? I'll report to my insurance, but I think you commissioners, you need to sort of get into conversations with the mayor and others and council members and say, stop allowing these, stop issuing these kinds of permits where nobody is held responsible. Nobody. Okay. Lime bike, they don't want anything to do with it. For me, it's not about the insurance. It's about stopping a problem that is out of control and is damaging the quality of life in Los Angeles. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Betty Lay.
Good morning.
Good morning. What items would you like to speak on?
Chief's report, agenda items, and public comment, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Okay, first I support LAPD. I support Chief Moore's report. On the agenda items, I support 4A, B, C, and D. And I think 45 minutes is plenty of time for public comment. If people were ready ahead of time to speak, follow the policy by speaking on agenda items and not stuff from years ago, whatever. I just think people need to also speak from the heart and not off from a script. And with that, I yield the rest of my time. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Philip Tabby.
Hello, all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Thank you. I care about all of our communities in Los Angeles, and I support law enforcement and our officers. As I work with different communities, the one thing I notice as a common theme is everybody wants law and order. I do believe if Angelenos knew how many police officers are deployed on our streets, they'd be frightened and they'd demand change. I looked up crime numbers, and as always, they're extremely high. Commissioners, this is happening under your watch. One of you, Valanche, takes a long sabbatical from a meeting that is easily accessed on your computer from anywhere in the world. Upon your return, you shake your head to the ones speaking that want law enforcement to be defunded and disbanded. We can see that you do not care about our officers. Why does this commission avoid asking questions on Chief Moore's COVID report? Commissioner Decker, you seem to be fantastic with numbers, and I'm surprised you haven't questioned the scattered numbers Chief Moore reports. Item number 1 on the agenda. I mean, 3/4 of the vaccinated are the ones getting COVID. Let's see. But, I'm concerned that when officer tests positive for COVID, they are given 10 days off. That's hurting our communities. I call it the COVID vacation that officers look forward to. I really think this should be changed immediately. On another subject, Chief, can you please give us the information on the investigation at Topanga about the Gadsden flag? Do you believe that the American flag or the Gadsden flag represents what the woke call white nationalism? And once again, Monica Rodriguez or any council member having an influence on how LAPD deploys officers is wrong and should never, ever happen ever again. And when the community speaks up, we want LAPD to understand that these are the communities that we live in. Crime's out of control, people are getting killed, and the suspects are getting away on bicycles. Killing's becoming a casual thing, and that's horrible. Instead, this commission and some LAPD command staff have gone woke and only worry about their careers. Yeah, Soberoff, a lot of your questions, it seems that you should know the answers. You've been on the commission for quite a while. I do think all commissioners should have a radio. If you don't have a radio, get one assigned to you and listen to the TAC channels, listen to the officers. Have you ever heard an officer screaming for help as they're chasing a suspect that has a gun pointed to him? I bet not. Steve is wandering around looking for his glasses, not even paying attention. What happened to honest policing? What happened to community policing? I know who can fix it. Rick Caruso. I give the rest of my time.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have caller ending 1264.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Hi, yes, what items would you like to speak on?
All of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yes, commissioners and police chief. We really need to start having better communications with our community policing because they're the ones who help the community avoid a lot of the tragic situations that have been happening in our communities. We have illegal street vending in prohibited areas, and I know that's not a particular crime like somebody getting shot or anything, but it does create an atmosphere of lawlessness, and we need to address that. And I had an officer come out. These people were vending in an illegal area, prohibited area, next to a church, and obviously it's against the church practices to have this activity going around the temple of, the church. And yet the officer refused to do anything about it. And the rules and regulations are there for her to faithfully enforce the laws that are given to her. I mean, she takes an oath. And I just like to see a lot of the smaller things being addressed because that's the way we avoid a lot of accidents that happen, a lot of deaths, public safety. It's very important. And that's my time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Haram Cormier Jr.
Hello,
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
all items.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I just don't understand how you are gonna be worth $4 billion, have thousands of officers, nearly 10,000 officers, and still want to spin a victim narrative. Like, y'all are underfunded, under-resourced, and y'all are the ones suffering when we are the ones taking the bullets. We're the ones getting raped. We're the ones being the victims of all types of crazy stuff going on in this world. What side of the coin are you on to say that you are impacted by this more than us? You're not. That doesn't make sense. It makes no logical sense at all. And on top of that, how are you going to sit here and talk about how the LAPD has to cut down on sexual assault investigations and all this other stuff when you guys are some of the largest perpetrators of sexual violence in the world? In LA, at least, you have a large amount of pedophiles inside of your department, and that's known. You have a large amount of perverted officers, a large amount of your female officers are sexually harassed by other male cops. Like, nigga, we don't want to hear that shit. You are the dog. It's like y'all come around us dirty and expect us to want you around us. We don't. It's not how this works. My other question is, you know, how many times do we have to sit up here and y'all limit the time already? And we have all these people coming up on here talking about all types of COVID vaccine mandates and all this other stuff that doesn't make any sense and it's just eating up all the time. And Soberoff gets to sit here on his fucking phone, not even listening to people who really go through the stuff that is supposed to be addressed here. What's the reason for that, buddy? Does not make any sense. All these programs y'all got, bro, it's not helping. You know who's really resource deprived? The kids who have to eat off of napkins for plates. You know, the people who have to sit in the back of these fucked up neighborhoods, you know, doing drugs all day because their life was, you know, they're traumatized, bro. That's who really, like, come on, bro. What's the correlation here? We don't want a partnership with the police. The police are dirty, especially the LAPD. That is the most dirty police department in this world. They are corrupt. Everything about them is backwards. We don't want nothing to do with it. It's not about partnership. It's coercion. It's extortion. It's murder. It's taken advantage of. Why would you want that? Soberoff, you are a hoe. You can stay off
This is
your
off
phone.
topic,
Even your
Madam
mama's off
Speaker. Let's
topic.
go to the next speaker, please.
Okay, next we have Sarah Bowers.
Hi there.
Hi, what items would you like to speak on?
All of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I guess I listen to these meetings a lot, and I'm kind of baffled or confused about one of the incidents that Chief Moore talked about, where there's an investigative stop that ended in a shooting, and he said that an investigative stop happened because the car was parked in a handicap spot, and I feel like very confused how that then gives LAPD permission to escalate a situation into violence and into someone getting killed. I feel concerned that LAPD continues to use like quote unquote investigative stops to escalate situations, and LAPD officers often are the ones that escalate a situation and then they blame and kill someone because they're defending themselves, even though they're the ones that put themselves in the dangerous situation. So I'm concerned about that. I'm also just concerned about police. It sounds like LAPD looking for more opportunities to be involved with youth and elderly programs. There are plenty of community specialists and youth program developers and other community members who specialize in this as their full-time job. And unfortunately, they're paid a lot less than police officers. So if you stopped having LAPD spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on officers doing these programs that other people who are professional at doing those programs, LAPD would be saving a lot of money. And Chief Moore is also talking a lot about communities needing resources and services, which, you know, it's totally true. I totally agree with that. I'm kind of just baffled because he then wants even more money for the department, and his department's basically just like chokehold on half the city's budget is one of the reasons why there aren't more resources and more services for communities. So there's that. I'm also continuously baffled that the commission keeps asking LAPD for reports, even though they're an oversight commission, but they still keep trusting LAPD to report on LAPD. And as far as giving LAPD officers a sign-on bonus, with how much money LAPD officers already get, I'm not sure about giving officers a signing bonus. LAPD already uses plenty of my tax money to pay LAPD officers exorbitant amounts, higher than other non-LAPD civilian positions that are shown to actually prevent crime in the community. So my vote is no for the signing bonus. And I also want to ask Chief Moore if he's including in his crime stats the crimes his own officers are committing in killing and shooting people, because he should just be as concerned about those as the rest of the crimes.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Hamid Khan. Hamid Khan.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah, I just want to go back to some of the comments that other speakers have made, and I think it was the name is Haram Kamir and Nee as well, on holding the community hostage and the coercive relationship and then armed social work. That's exactly what the Community Safety Partnership is built upon. We even filed a public records request, and to see what has been the request and the stream of requests that the communities and various public housing projects had placed to the city for improvements in their local communities, like speed bumps and extra lights and all of that. And there was a complete neglect, an absolutely complete neglect, until the LAPD just comes in with this, with all of this, just banging their drums and with their guns blazing, that now we have come in. And that's exactly what occupying armies do. So when we talk about counterinsurgency, that's exactly what community policing is built on. Which brings me to the point of this mini Mounties curriculum that is being proposed as a donation, which is again a classic example. Because here we have, going back into your own documents and looking at the history of this thing, that going back to 2003 and then talking about Skid Row area, talking about just not only a refuge for the homeless, but also attracted those who were alcohol drug dependent, which in turn impacted street level crime located just several blocks from 9th Street Elementary School. So here's two things: criminalizing poverty and then pimping that poverty. And then now circling back after pimping poverty with the reallocation of resources, because now it is dependent upon from one hand, it's the iron fist, velvet glove approach, the hand that feeds and the hand that just murders and kills. So this is what we are talking about, a complete failure, which is, of course, you are the cops are the enforcers, they are the tip of the policing knife of white supremacy. And it's a failure of the whole system and the city as well, because this is exactly what is called intentional neglect. This is exactly what's called planned abandonment. So then to abandon an area and then turn them and use this whole language of blight and everything just to then make it palatable for developers and real estate profit making. And that's what broken windows policing is, which then brings me to the record murders that continue to happen. So 25 people shot. When you do the math, it's almost like every 9 days, LAPD is out there hunting people to shoot at. It's almost like, target practice that's going on. And 11 people murdered. These are not numbers. These are lives. These are names. These are family members. These are kin of people. This is what is happening when we talk about the police state and the dismemberment of communities, which is a planned event.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Gina Viola.
Can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
Chief's report and public comment, please.
Okay, 2 minutes.
So the teenage youth needs money from the city budget, not from your hoarded police budget. I would invite those of you who even live in the city of Los Angeles to go ahead and take a drive down Olympic Boulevard, stop at Crenshaw, and take a look up at the billboard that's there. It will show you the visual of what our city gives to the youth development line item in its budget versus the policing budget. Stop taking every other department's budget and putting it into the police budget category. And then we have to beg for money back from you so that you can find a way to make sure that police are in every single line item of our city's budget. Also, folks not being able to pass the screening, I'm grateful. I really hope that means that folks are not racist enough to become the members of your department. I'm hoping that that's what that is screening out. This body is a farce of a sham. Each and every person in this city of Los Angeles could send you an email telling you what the public wants. All you have to do is look back at that June 2nd meeting that went 8+ hours long, where almost every member who could called in to tell you what they wanted. And this body gleefully does the opposite. You are the exact reason that the LAPD is the leader in police murders in our country. It is a travesty that we have a police commission that is supposed to be the public's voice in police affairs. It's a travesty that we go to other cities like Torrance and we sit in their city council meetings and demand an oversight body like this one, when I know in my heart all it is going to do is continue to run cover for law enforcement, as you all do week after week, month after month. Your own longest standing police commissioner asked questions this morning that sounded like it's his first time in this meeting. Do better. All of you need to resign, and we need a body that actually does something for the citizens of this.
Okay, thank you. Next, we have Zach Sherwin.
Hi, I'll speak on all items, please.
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yeah. So interesting to hear a follow-up question today from Commissioner Bonner about high-end retail robberies, which is a topic that you talked about previously, a long time ago. April, the chief said in his response. It's interesting to see that kind of like, hey, whatever happened to that issue? Because, you know, I'll tell you from the perspective of someone who attends these meetings regularly, so many topics come up, you don't ask any questions about them, and then they sort of pass through the system of this commission, apparently undigested, and we never hear about them again. So some continuity and some hearkening back to an earlier topic is noteworthy to me. But I also note the contrast between any of you commissioners ever following up about any of the countless events in which the LAPD and or Chief Moore himself have screwed up. And yet you do, Commissioner Bonner, pitch the chief a softball question about something that allows him to underscore how dangerous it is out there and how important the LAPD is in keeping us safe. So just noting that during my comment time today. Similarly, the chief talked at length about street takeovers. And as a reader of the LA Times, I can't help but think of a headline from this week, quote, "Dangerous street takeovers take deadly toll on Los Angeles." There were multiple stories in the Times about this topic. Another was headlined, quote, "LAPD to crack down on street takeovers, says cars will start disappearing real soon." But again, a remarkable contrast, because there was lots of talk today about an issue that was in the headlines, and it's an issue in which the LAPD gets to look like public safety restoring heroes. But we don't hear you so much as mention a syllable about other headlines, which we could recite a litany of, in which the LAPD has fallen down on the job like the incompetent, racist, violent stumble bums that they are, let alone, commissioners, hearing you ask any hard-hitting questions about any of the items on the agenda. Let's see. What do I have time for? I guess I'll say that it's kind of wild that despite the dearth of officers that has everybody in a panic during the public comment period, you've still managed to shoot 25 people this year. So clearly LAPD officers are doing their part to keep those numbers up. One of the commissioners sure hit the nail on the head when he said earlier in this meeting that being a civilian in LAPD is still a good job, even though it's, quote, "not the same as being an officer. That state-sponsored violence that they get handed the reins to is really quite a perk." I don't know why a cop caller is given free rein to rant about Lime scooters and gets to keep going, but another caller gets cut off for broaching the topic of whether one of the commissioners is a hoe or not. Figure it out, you clowns. I yield the rest of my time to the meeting.
Okay, thank
Madam
you.
Secretary, the next caller will be the last caller. Thank you.
Okay, our next speaker is Elisa Avalos.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes. What items would you like to speak on?
All of them?
Okay, 3 minutes.
Yes. Everyone's talking about defunding the police officers and especially our councilwoman in District 7, but Where I live, just in this past month, there's been 3 drive-bys close to my house. I usually go bike riding in the afternoons, but one of the drive-bys happened at 7 in the afternoon. Now, it would be great if the police officers, the community partnership officers, and Foothill Division officers will get together and communicate, especially our councilwoman. Everyone says, defund the cops, we don't need them, but I'm sorry, where I live, we need them. Now, I believe that we need more community events so our community can start having conversations with our police officers. Now, they're the only ones that I know that put their lives on the line for us. Yes, there's good cops and bad cops, the same way there's bad and good community members. And another thing I want to talk about also is about the police union. I don't understand how is it that they haven't fought enough for the police officers and making sure that our councilwoman is not allowed to take a good officer away from a community that love our community, our officers, Caesar, and our councilwoman was just easily able just to move him somewhere else without respecting the chief or the captain and talking to them or talking to the community. Now, I believe that we need to have more communication and we need to have more community events. And we need to have officers also reach out to schools, high schools, and let them know that we're here for you guys, but we need to work together. That's the only way the crime rate's gonna go down. And I thank the officers for what they do. And I've had problems with officers, but when I go and I spoke to the captain, they were held accountable. So I'm for the officers and I want to thank them. And I also think that they do need a raise because they need to buy their own, they need to purchase their own uniforms. And those uniforms are expensive. And yes, other companies, their employees have to buy their own uniforms, but they don't do the same job that the police officers do, jumping fences, chasing people. Sometimes the sun messes up the uniforms also. So we need to be respectful and understanding also. And I just want to thank everyone for what they're doing for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. That's the end of the public comment period. At this time, we're going to go to item 3 on the agenda, AB 361. At this time, I move that the board find that the COVID-19 state of emergency remains active and state or local officials have imposed or recommended risk reduction measures. That on July 7th, 2022, the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health reported that the predominant COVID-19 subvariants have higher transmissibility and the ability to reinfect those who were infected with other variants. The increase in case has translated to an increase in the number of COVID-19 related hospitalizations and death. The average number of COVID positive patients per day in LA County hospitals has increased from 1 month ago. In accordance with AB 361, this Brown Body Act has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency and that the state of emergency continues to present imminent risk to the health and safety of attendees and continues to directly impact the ability of the board members to meet safely in person. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we're going to go to the consent agenda items, item 4 on the agenda. Are there any commissioners that have any questions about A, B, C, or D? Seeing none, I move that we adopt the recommendations that are set forth for item 4. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. At this time, we're going to go to item 5 on the regular agenda, which is the department's report with respect to the after action report implementation plan command staff training. This will be presented by Deputy Chief Mark Reyna. Good morning, Chief Reyna.
Good morning, Commissioners, Chief Moore, Mr. T-Fank, Inspector General. Reporting back to you on our layout plan for command staff training as it relates to the incident command system. As you probably saw in the document that you were presented, we worked with our training folks at Training Division. As you may recall, there used to be a command and control training that we had put on that previously stopped about a year and a half ago. So we went back and took the command and control portion of that class out and put it into our critical thinking force options, but modified it for command staff for a 4-hour version. That training already started. We've already trained 15. Last week, we have 25 more command staff slated to train this Thursday. 2 more classes next deployment period, and then we'll have a makeup class DP10 for anyone that happened to miss. And that'll be it's a good course. Obviously, we talked about our critical thinking force option course that's being presented to our officers. So when they're out there dealing with individuals, we want the let it work concept of using the less lethal and having that command and control. We're taking those concepts and teaching the command staff, not only so they understand what we're teaching the officers, but they can take those command and control concepts with them into the ICS format. We also developed that new 8-hour incident command system course, which was developed by Dr. Pennell and our staff from our emergency services division that oversee our ICS training. And we came up with our own 8-hour incident command system course, and that was post-certified for us. That will be rolling out here at the end of September. Emergency Services Division will be taking on that training. They have the personnel that was approved through the after action budget. We're working to get them staffed, but they're ready to go regardless to start that training. So the training orders are going out. That'll start at the end of September, and moving forward, and all command staff will be required to attend that 8-hour course. In addition, we talked about the Hydra Suite. That'll begin in October of 2022. Emergency Services Division personnel will also be tasked with overseeing that training with the new personnel that will be assigned to them. They're working hand in hand with Training Division. The Hydra Suites are located in the ARTC Academy in Westchester. We are kind of the middle person between ESD and the vendor to make sure that the software is updated and the equipment is updated with what we're doing right now, so we can roll that out in October. And again, all command staff will be required to go through that training on a 2-year cycle. They'll continue to go through. So we're excited about the Hydra being up and running, and looks like we'll be on target for October of this fall here to get that training going. And then in addition, we talked about the TEACS training at the Texas A&M campus. That is the national training that's put on for ICS, and there's all sorts of departments and first responders from around the country that attend that training. Difficult training to schedule. We talked about that before with command staff because they do have to go out of town for 4 to 5 days in Texas. However, Commander Phil Fontanetta, who is retired, who is still a reserve officer with the department, he is an instructor at TEACS. So we've been working with him to allow TEACS to give us certain slots of availability, and they were able to give us a schedule until the fall of next year. So now we can go ahead and schedule all of our command staff months ahead of time. So there should be no conflict with command staff because we know there's obviously a high demand on their schedules with everything that they're tasked with doing each day. So they'll have plenty of time to schedule that out months ahead of time so they can attend. So we're my post unit and my training bureau staff are working with the TEAC staff to get the training orders out to command staff and get those scheduled out months ahead of time. So there's no issue with conflict in the schedule of them attending. So that's the rollout there. And one other thing that's not on here is we have our LEADS training, which is a law enforcement development series. That's training that's put on by Dr. Pennell and her staff to all of our command staff. We usually do that once, sometimes twice a year. We are scheduled for that in the late fall. We're looking at late October for that. And we'll also have ICS portion in that training, in the LEADS training for command officers also. And I know that I'm scheduled to come back, I believe it's September 13th, to talk about the overall numbers of how we're looking. Should have updated numbers, especially with the TEACS training and how that's been scheduled out for the next few months. To give you an idea of how many command staff will be attending TEACS over, say, for example, the next 6 to 8 months.
Thank you, Chief Reyna. At this time, I'll call on Commissioner Soboroff. Have any questions or comments? No, thank you. Chief Reyna, before I call on other commissioners, this portion of the after action report, the implementation of the command staff training, this was, if I recall correctly, the genesis from the Chaliff report. Is that correct?
I believe genesis of all three reports, and maybe Chief Moore can add on to that, that all three reports cited concerns regarding the level of training that command staff had received, especially new command staff that have come on between maybe an abundance of training that occurred years ago compared to when the civil unrest occurred in 2020. But I believe all three reports had identified some issues in some aspects for all command staff. So when you put it together, the main issue was proper training, updated training, and consistent training for command staff when it comes to the incident command system.
And I understand just anecdotally that there may have been some issues in getting or ensuring that all command staff had attended prior training that was offered that resulted from the after action report. What are we doing now to ensure that all command staff will attend this training that you've just updated us on?
You know, sir, we had a meeting, our general staff, all staff members were in attendance, both sworn and civilian. And I think that message was made clear that when you get these training orders for this type of training that you shall attend. And if there's some type of issue or conflict, you need to notify obviously their supervisor immediately and to let us know so we can reschedule. And anyone who does not show to that training, within an hour or so of them showing up to the training, we know who showed. So for example, if we have 25 people scheduled for Thursday, if only 20 are going to show and we don't have a previous excused absence for the other 5, that will be emailed to Chief Choi and to the director of that office so they can take appropriate action as to why those command staff did not attend the training.
When do you anticipate completion of training of all command staff so that you can come back to the commission and report that all command staff has attended the training?
For all aspects of this, you know, for example, the 4-hour command and control critical thinking force options, we're looking by the end of hopefully DP 10. So it's taking about 2 to 3 DPs to get everybody through that. We're really taking an aggressive approach of having all these command staff go through it, not just 2 or 3 at a time. We're looking at all Captain 1s first, all Captain 3s next, that type of thing. So we can get everybody through and we're not impacting patrol operations or other operations out there in the field. I would say conservatively, probably it would take about 4 to 5, maybe 6 DPs to get everybody through this on that aggressive approach we're taking.
But Commissioner, I want to clarify that what's really important about the after action reports, all 3 of them, is ensuring that we perpetuate the training going forward. There's a shelf life, this is a perishable skill. In the last year, 35 of our essentially 70 or 75 captains have promoted into the captain rank. So while we're doing this surge to ensure a cross-section of them and everyone participates, this needs to continue. This needs to become continuing education, just as other members of our organization have perishable skills such as driving and firearms and other things. Command officers, we need to make sure that we maintain their skill set with the various training modules that have been identified here. So we don't see us finishing. We do see us improving. As you remember, the report that came before you was how 35 had not gone. And what I believe was occurring was in that analysis was that we had recent appointments that did not get caught up in the particular classes because they weren't captains then. But nonetheless, lastly, I appreciate Chief Reyna's work, for instance, with the TEACS program, so we can map out classes between now and next September, a year from now. Command officers are often tasked with boards of rights and other obligations, primary duty assignments that can get them hung up, if you will, from attending more training, say, in the next 4 weeks. They've already got a full calendar with many other obligations and responsibilities, use of force boards and so forth. And so we're working diligently with Mark and his people. And I appreciate that they're establishing a training calendar, and training is a primary duty assignment for captains and commanders and staff officers, just as it is for our line officers. And we're drawing that focus now.
Thank you, Chief. Commissioner Decker, any questions? Commissioner Bonner?
Thank you very much. Yes, just a couple. Chief Reyna, first, a couple on the Hydra Suite training. And the first question is, I recall from an earlier conversation that in order to complete that, I seem to recall that, you know, there in, I think 2018, shortly after I came on, there was a disbanding of the little standing group of people who had some of the necessary training, and that to address that, some people had to go away to London or something for some period of time. So if you just clarify just whether the training that's referenced here is, you know, accounts for that, and if those people are ready to go, or maybe it's a different equation, right? As we sit here today.
So in working with the staff at Emergency Service Division, and there's some training division staff that used to be part of that cadre back then that have moved on to other assignments. We're ready to pull them into this training once the software and equipment is updated and move forward with that rollout. We're looking in October, and they can provide that training. They don't have to go away for any specific training. The vendor is going to work with them to make sure they understand the software and how it works. As we move forward with filling the cadre with the approval that the city council had given us for the employees to be permanently assigned to that cadre, we can train, and then we can also fill at the same time, and those people can be trained as we move forward, and then eventually, hopefully within a few months here, we have a full-time cadre, and that's their specific job. But that's not going to stop us. We can move forward with that because we do have people that have been previously trained and are ready to go.
Okay, appreciate that. And then along the fault or similar lines, on the first page of the report, there's a note that is signaling some potential conflicting priorities with the active bystander and command development training. Can you just put that in perspective, you know, in terms of what you're really signaling there?
What we're saying there is that, just like the chief has said, we put mandates on our command staff for all sorts of things. ABLE obviously has been a top priority for us. So we're looking to balance that. Hopefully we can, once we start rolling out the Hydra training in October, and we also have we're anticipating ABLE starting in October, that we're able to balance that. We believe, in my conversation with Dr. Pinnell and training division staff and ESD, that we can do that. We just put that note in there that there could be a potential conflict in that, but we would just work it out over the next EP or so after that. But we believe we can make it work and get the training in starting in October.
Appreciate that. And then the final question is that, as was noted, the impetus for this particular training was tied back to the after action reviews that were on the heels of what's were referred to as the unusual occurrence kind of situation. Question just is, when the command staff goes through this training, is the large, you know, crowd control, unusual occurrence, protest, that environment, is that the primary or potentially the sole focus of the training, such that, you know, that's where the benefit is when and if that occurs again? Or are there elements of the training that also benefit, you know, the more dynamic situations that you know, evolve from a call for response to a call for service?
It's a combination of both. It's touching on the crowd control situations, and adding on to those scenarios with other things that may occur during a crowd control situation. And it also is touching on things that could happen here in the city of Los Angeles at any time, an earthquake, a major fire, or something that's happening, and combining those things, especially in the Hydra suite situation. That's what Hydra is developed about, is to have certain things happening, and you're trying to put out one incident, another thing is popping up, and to test and to train our command staff to handle that. So it is a combination of both. It's not just strictly on civil unrest, but it's also teaching them to handle multiple things at once, multitasking, if I may, and handling under stress, and how to appropriately control these situations and put your resources there and make sure you understand the problem or addressing the problem appropriately.
And so if we laid all the relevant training out on a table, would we find that that there's also training that, say, the patrol officers receive that in some appropriate way dovetail with the training that the command staff is receiving?
I would say yes. For example, in that critical thinking, that's something the patrol officers are receiving that training, and we're taking some of that so they understand. They're getting the same training as the officers, but there's also the command and control from a previous class. That, you know, that's an example. The ICS is really, the 8-hour ICS is geared towards overall command of these things as a incident commander or operations commander in the ICS system. But it also is touching on some of the things that patrol officers would have to deal with, so they have an understanding of what patrol is going through, so they're not just in a bubble making decisions. And the Hydro Suite is the same thing. It starts as a small incident and can build up to a major incident. So they're appreciating what's happening out there on the street, so they have an understanding of what officers are going through.
So if I'm a patrol officer, I mean, am I familiar with ICS and the basic tenets of that?
Patrol officers get in the academy, it's discussed in the academy as they're coming out, a basic understanding ICS and the ICS 200, I believe it is, for patrol. There's not a whole lot of training for officers that are going through for ICS systems. So the higher you move up in your ranks, P3, sergeant, lieutenant, more mandated training by the state or mandated training by us occurs. But for patrol officers to have a clear, concise understanding of ICS, they get the basically COPLA, they call it, the Command Operations Planning, Logistics and Administration. They understand the basic concept of ICS. So if they are thrust into that position in the field, they understand that they are declare themselves as an incident commander. They can start delineating basic functions until that supervision arrives at the scene. So they get the basic training on that, but that enhanced, detailed, intricate training ICS comes later as you're moving up through the ranks.
Got it. Appreciate that. Thank you very much, Chief, and thank you, Commissioner Briggs.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. Commissioner Flanche.
Thank you. Chief Reyna, can you tell me how we measure competency and all these different trainings? Is it just like check you went through the training, or is there some way to assess whether they actually learned something?
Well, all these training is different. There's not necessarily a test at the end of the training. Depending, for example, if I was teaching a firearms course and they have to shoot that firearm at the end and qualify at a certain level or show the proficiency, I can evaluate the person to see if they're able to shoot that gun properly and appropriately. In this case, it's more of theory and concept. However, the instructors are there, they're watching, they're asking questions, and if they find that someone may not be getting it or may not understand it, they can take that person aside, they can work with them one-on-one. They'll suggest back through the reviews that maybe a certain person needs additional training because they're just not understanding the concept. But again, it's more theory and working together as a team and understanding that moving forward.
I would add, Commissioner, that the style of the delivery of adult learning is scenario-based training. So the model of the explanation of the theory, the strategies, the tactics, what's the overarching purpose of what we're trying to achieve, and then the modeling of it, and then requiring the student to model it back. For instance, in the TEACS delivery, when they provide the concept of ICS, it's a complex problem-solving environment, and then they model a series of scenario-based where the actions of each of the positions are shown, but then the student has to go in and they formulate a team, and then they have to go out and execute that. And so that and then they debrief it for learning points. And the debrief is not just instructor led, it's instructor guided, but it's also student participant. What they're saying, here's what I felt I did right. Here's things I think I could have done better, or the learnings I experienced. So it's an adult learning concept that's not a checkbox and it's not a multiple test, though there are in some of these models, I don't have the list right in front of me. There is an important aspect of testing, and we realize that simple lecture that we want people to model the behavior, demonstrate it, and demonstrate that they're absorbing it. And then there's always the aspect if a person's not getting it, and they're not demonstrating the model, that we just don't send them back to the command without further. They've got to demonstrate the adoption of these capabilities.
And if I may add on to that, Commissioner, the instructors are very good at finding people, or in that group that, like the chief said, may not be getting it, maybe struggling a little bit, not understanding the concept, especially in the scenario base, and they tend to gravitate towards that person, give them extra instruction one-on-one, and usually they'll take them aside on the breaks and have that conversation and allow them the opportunity to come back for additional training or work with them on one-on-one training. But the instructors are really good at identifying individuals who may not be getting that concept.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that it's not just like, check, I went to that training, and then it's like you could have just kind of coasted in the training, right?
Well, they have to work through the problem. They have to show their ability to handle the situation. And if they're not, it's going to stand out to the instructors, and they'll address it appropriately.
And do we have some, you mentioned some like overarching concepts. Is there a way to reinforce I mean, because these are things that are not employed every day. So as Chief said, they're perishable skills. Is there a way to reinforce either by having these overarching concepts that, you know, we could do a refresher or something?
Well, we plan on in these, and the ICS system, although we think globally and big as a, you know, a major earthquake or major situation, we're implementing our incident management teams. But as simple as a 2-block perimeter, looking for a suspect who ran from the officers, that ICS system, it should be implemented. You have an incident commander, you have people delegated to do duty. So even on the simplest level of a field operation, there should be doing the ICS. So we're constantly doing it, maybe just on a lower level. However, with this training, it is on a 2-year cycle. We will continue to send command officers and officers back through the critical thinking force options, through the Hydra suite, through the 8-hour incident command. So we saw that in the after action that maybe they had the training years ago and then it just stopped. So it lapsed for years and years. And now all of a sudden they're thrust into this position, and we don't want that to happen again. So
Well, as they're moving up, they're kind of they're retaking it, I guess, or reparticipating as they're moving up the ranks, because it's
correct. So if you make sergeant or you make detective or you make lieutenant in those schools that they go to and those ranks, there is a portion of the ICS in there that kind of that refresher plus all this other training that will be on a 2-year cycle that they'll have to go back through.
Got it. Thank you.
Thanks, Commissioner Kalanche. Chief Reyna, thank you very much for a very good presentation. And please keep us advised, because this type of training, I believe, it's my opinion, keeps the LAPD at the forefront of what we refer to as 21st century policing. And I certainly want to stay there, and I want to make sure that all our officers are continually trained, particularly with respect to perishable skills. And this aspect that you refer to as critical thinking is one of those components that will help us stay at the forefront of these reform-minded type of policies and procedures and training for the department. Thank you.
Thank you.
At this point, we're going to go into closed session. Well, sorry, I have to move that we approve the department's report. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. At this point, we're going to go into closed session at 11:45. Thank you, everyone.
Board of Police Commissioners will now recess into closed session to discuss agenda items 6A1 and 6A2 in accordance with Government Code 54957.
Looks like we're all here. We've concluded closed session. Mr. Tiefenk, can you please read out the findings?
Yes, Mr. President. Commission has concluded its work in closed session as relates to closed session item 6A1, officer involved shooting 051-21. The commission on a 5-0 vote adopted the chief of police recommendations, which were tactics, tactical debrief, 2 police officers, 3 police officer, 2. Administrative disapproval, 1 sergeant, 2 sergeant 1s, 1 police officer, 3 police officer 2s. Drawing and exhibiting in policy, 1 sergeant 1, 2 police officer 3, 5 police officer 2s. Lethal use of force in policy, 1 police officer 3. Item 6A2, officer involved shooting number 053-21. Commission on a 5-0 vote adopted the chief of police recommendations, which were tactics, tactical debrief, 1 sergeant 1, 4 police officer 2s. Drawing and exhibiting in policy, 1 sergeant 1, 4 police officer 2s. Less lethal use of force in policy, 1 police officer 2. Lethal use of force in policy, 1 police officer 2. That concludes the report out.
Thank you, Mr. Tiefenk. There being no further business before the Board of Police Commission, I move that we adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. See you next week. Have a safe week.